it doesn't really become an argument until we try to win. If we are trying to find a solution together and I'm interested in what you have to say and I want you to be interested in what I have to say, that's good. That's healthy. That's communication. But when it becomes a problem is when one of us tries to establish dominance over the other. And it's amazing how we can do this in so many subtle, subconscious ways that we aren't even aware of, right? And the most common example that I can think about is interrupting.
Yeah.
Right. So if I'm interrupting,
so what I think, Nick, is
perfect.
Should I let you?
Very good. No. That was perfect.
Demonstrate it?
Thank you, Jim. Thank you. So yeah, being able, cutting somebody off, that is establishing dominance.
Right.
Because what is the message you're sending? You're sending,
your thought doesn't matter.
I'm done. Listen to you. Listen to what I have to say, because what I have to say is more important. And there's a lot of things that we do that establish dominance that we don't think of as being establishing of dominance.
And to add to that, Nick, I'm going to throw two therapeutic pieces of homework to these people. Okay, so Nick, one thing I thought would be kind of neat for you and I to do is to demonstrate a listening skill that we actually make a lot of our patients do, which is the when you say, I feel when you say, remember that? Like, I feel X when you say Y in situation Z, and then the other person has to say the whole I hear you saying. So here's a trick that Nick and I will do with a lot of couples. Whenever we're working with people and we want to try to reblend their communication skills, Nick's right. Sometimes it's a dominance problem. Sometimes it's a winning problem. A lot of times, too, the other big culprit is a misunderstanding problem and a failure to be curious about what the other person's saying. And they give you 10% and you assume the other 90, and now you're running off in the wrong direction. And a lot of times, most fights that I see in couples are not even about the topic. You're fighting about fighting. Like 90% of the time, you are fighting about the fighting. It's about the thing you said in the last sentence, not what this whole conversation started about. I'm not mad about what you did. I'm mad about how you said it, or whatever. And that's the common problem. So one thing that Nick and I will do for homework is we will challenge couples to actually practice a training wheels approach to rethinking about how they have their fight and how they have their conversation. So we're going to role play that real quick. Let's name this couple. Okay, so we don't have a name on this one, so I think it should be Ken and Barbie. Okay, I'm going to be Barbie, and I think you should be Ken. Yeah, I'll do it. Since I have the long flowing hair, I'll be Barbie, you be Ken. But Ken, I'm angry at you because you after work you go get a beer with John, your buddy, and you don't call me. You don't see if I want to have dinner. You don't even check to see if I'm going to do anything, and it's always happening. Is ridiculous.
Barbie.
Yeah.
What I'm hearing you say is that I don't communicate with you enough. I don't check in with you enough. And I think you're saying that you're starting to feel neglected or unimportant.
Yeah, that is what I'm saying, Ken. But no, okay, so notice what Nick just did. Nick rephrased what I said back to me, okay? That we call that reflection. So instead of taking it and responding to my allegations, instead of giving an excuse or context or a reason or rationale, he forewent all of that, and he made sure he has the message clear. He started with understanding. Hey, I think I hear you saying the following. And he rephrased it in a fair way. He didn't minimize it. He didn't mock it.
Right.
Another technique is to say, I feel when you in this situation. So a way that Barbie would be trained to retalk. So we would challenge Ken to summarize like you just saw Nick do. And now what Barbie would be redoing is the therapist would say, okay, Barbie, here's how I want you to say that whole thing over again. I want you to say it in 3 sentences. I feel emotion word, when you action word, in or during situation. And so, okay, I would practice that. And I'd say, okay, Ken, I feel unimportant, okay, or I feel diminished when you don't check with me before you make plans after work. That is a very neat and tidy information package that you have wrapped up, you have made it clear, and now you've sent it to Ken. And ideally, Ken would receive that and say, Barbie, I hear you saying that you feel diminished when I don't check with you after work. to see if you wanted to hang out or whatever. And that's a complete message set. Now there's no misunderstanding. We're on the same page. It's slower. It's confusing. A lot of people feel like, well, that's like really nuanced and really babyish. And,
Right.
I just kind of want to fly off the handle and get into a fight. I'll bet you do. But as therapists, we're going to interrupt that, and we're going to try to remodel how we even have conversations in the first place.
And this, I've gone over this with a lot of folks, and it is the response that I usually get is, "Oh my God, do I really have to do this? This is so cheesy."
Yeah.
But do you want the relationship to work or not?
Do it my way. Your way wasn't working. Now we're doing it my way.
It is a highly effective way of communicating, and it knocks out 90% of the issue, which is usually just complete misunderstanding about what we're talking about.
Yes.
So it really definitely works. And I think, the other thing too, getting and giving and asking for feedback.
Yes.
Right. And asking for clarification.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm hearing you say this. Is that what, when you say it this way, it makes me think that this is what you're saying. Is that what you mean?
Yes, checking.
Give the other person the opportunity of saying, yeah, you got it. Or no, that's not at all what I meant.
Right.
And then you give them the opportunity of rewording it and rephrasing it into a way that is, that will make sense. Yeah. Now, the big challenge is to do it without sarcasm.
Yeah, yeah.
You have to be honest about
honest.
it. You have to be sincere about
Right.
it. You cannot put sarcasm in this and expect that this is going to work.
That's why it's nice to have a therapist, because they kind of referee that. They'll make sure the person doesn't mock it.
Yeah.
But even if they're mocking it and you're both able to laugh at it, we're fine with it because you're fighting less. And like one more intervention, Nick, that I'll throw out there that I've done with patients before when I work with couples, one of the very first things is remodeling the way we talk. Sure, that's what we just demonstrated. Another intervention that I've done in the past is something called an interference pattern. Interference patterns are really fun, and it's something that I like to use a lot. Very few therapists do it because you get called a quack, but I'm totally cool with it. I don't care because I think it's really cool and it's really effective. So an interference pattern is whenever I figure out what you're doing and then I add or take away something to that situation to just make it weird so that it's harder to do that naturally. So here's an example. I had a couple that same situation. They were fighting furiously and they would just have these knockdown, drag out fights. I tried to remodel how they talk to each other. That didn't work for very long. It was like a Band-Aid on a broken pipe, just eventually it all spilled out again. And so I was like, okay, where do you guys fight? And they're like, in our living room, in our kitchen, usually. I said, great. Okay, I can't stop you guys from fighting. You're not going to listen to my rules. So I'm going to make one rule. I only have one rule. If you follow one rule, I'll leave you alone. And they're like, all right, what's your one rule? And I was like, the only way you're allowed to fight is if you are standing on chairs. That's it. That's my only rule. Like, well, how's that going to fix anything? I was like, I don't know. But at least if you're going to, you may as well stand on a chair. It's just as pointless on the floor. And they were like, is this a metaphor? Is this like, and I was like, no. No, it's not a metaphor. Literally, pull out your kitchen chairs, stand on them, and then have it out. But if you get down from the chair, you're not allowed to continue fighting. The rule is you have to ascend to the chairs in order to have the fight. So if you need to take a potty break or whatever, as soon as you step down from that chair, the fight's on pause. You guys will have to come back to it when both of you can be on the chairs, right? And they were like, all right, so they followed my rule. And this is an interference pattern. So what I'm doing is I'm bringing your awareness to the silliness of the fight by putting you in a weird, unexpected, silly position where you don't just naturally get to go back to your old habits. You now have to analyze them and you have to put some effort into it. It's like how Nick talked about me putting my phone away and making a computer the way that I get on social media. He's creating an interference pattern to force me to go an extra step before I go back to a habit. And so I'm forcing you to take one extra step to do something that's weird and annoying before you're allowed to partake in your fight. Mm-hmm. And ideally that causes this interruption in your pattern. And I've seen couples that have just, I had one couple that go, I was like, had you guys fight as much this last week as you did the week before after we did the chair thing? And they said no. And I was like, why is that? And they're like, our legs hurt. Like, we finally decided, let's call a peace so we can go sit down.
And that's great, right? That's great because what they're doing is they are making a judgment call and saying, do I want to do this? Is it worth it?
Right.
It's not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
I guess it's not. If it's not worth me standing on a chair, I guess it's not worth me addressing.
Yeah, and that was the only rule, and they lived by it. And Nick, we could do a whole show on interference patterns because they're one of my favorite things to do. I had another couple that was fighting, and I tried the chair bit, and they were like, "No, we're not doing that," just because it wasn't an ideal situation for them physically. So I said, "Okay, that's cool. Tonight, I want you guys to go buy bubble gum." and I want you to get like Bubblicious bubble gum. And the only way you're allowed to fight is if you go get the gum and you're both chewing and popping bubbles during the fight. Like, and that's the only way. And if it loses its flavor, go get another one. But you have to have that be popping bubbles and chewing at all times. And it was just, again, an interference play to try to get them to, at least do something differently. If you're going to do it anyway, allow me to have you do it slightly differently.
Right.
Let's just see what happens. And like a lot of the time, just playing with that, just changing the dynamic is exhausting. And they're like, this is stupid. Let's go spit out our gum and watch Netflix. Yeah. It's like, okay, cool. And that we may not have permanently solved the issue of couples fighting for the rest of humanity and the rest of all time, but we've interfered and made a little bit of progress, not perfection, in this one relationship. So try those ideas. I think it'd be interesting to see how it works.
The last thing that I would kind of piggyback off of that is a little bit of self-awareness goes a long way.
Yes.
Understand when your optimum time is for having serious discussions, and plan that out in advance. So in a relationship, my significant other knows when my optimum times are to have a serious discussion and when are the bad times to have a serious discussion. If I haven't eaten, that's a bad time because that's just, I know that's a weak moment for me.
Yes.
Right. If I'm well rested, 2 hours before bed, that's my ideal time, my optimum time. That's when I feel most present. I'm calm. I can communicate effectively. Know when your time is. Share that with your significant other. Plan your arguments. Yes. Accordingly.
Plan your arguments. Actually, that's another intervention we did at one point, was it gave people a schedule and said, okay, so when can we make time to have this fight? And the rule was they weren't allowed to say a word about the fight until that time. And it was only budgeted for like 30 minutes. So they both pull out like essays of things they wanted to yell at the other person about. And they're just like spraying it, trying to get it all out there. Like, how much time do we have? 5 minutes. Okay. What else? Then like time's up and they're like, okay, let's go get dinner. Like a whole nother way to do it. Great question. Right. And please let us know which one of those wonderful interference patterns you've selected and tell us how it worked out.
Yeah, we'd love to hear back from you.
All right. That's all the time that we've got for this week's session. Thank you to those who contributed to our show today. We really appreciate it. Remember, pod therapy isn't something you should keep all to yourself. Help us reach others by sharing this episode. You can find us at facebook.com/podtherapy or on Twitter @podtherapyguys.
Do you want to add your own advice to today's questions? Post your thoughts at podtherapy.net and join the conversation. I'm Nick Tangeman.
I'm Jim Jobin.
Thanks, and we'll see you for your appointment next week.